All right, so let's start this live Google Hangout session, and it's really an honor for me to have you all here. I believe this is the first Google Hangout session on practitioners' cases on the MOOC, and it's really an honor to be the first to do the start off of this. My name is Wibo Koole. I'm a member of the Presencing Institute Global Practitioners Circle, and I've been involved with CRU in my consulting practice already for 7 to 8 years. And it's been really a wonderful source of inspiration, as I hope it is for you or will become for you. And here in Amsterdam, we have a live hub for the live sessions on every Wednesday afternoon, and it's really been a wonderful, energetic meeting every time. Must apologize for my cough every now and then because I have had a flu, so speaking is still a little different. If you have any questions on what I am telling, please put your questions on the questions screen, and I will see if I can go into them in my talk right away. The case that I want to talk about is about quite a special organization. As a consultant for the Presencing Institute, my colleague Julie Art, who also will be hosting a Google Hangout session later this week or next week, have been invited to work with an organization which is called Trager International. And Trager International is an international umbrella organization that connects 12 national associations of practitioners of the Trager approach. The Trager approach is an approach where people work with their hands. It's really, these people are really wonderful body workers. But the special thing of them is that they are really able to let you feel and to reconnect in your body with the feeling and the consciousness of what it is to have a healthy body. And the approach was formulated and designed in the 60s and 70s of the last century by a man, a wonderful doctor called Milton Trager. Julie and I have been involved with Trager International for almost 2 years now, and we've been with them through several cycles of the U process, and it's about that cycle and the practicalities of using the U process as a real tool for organizational innovation and development that I want to talk this afternoon. As I said, the organization of the practitioners in the Trager organization are really able to work with their hands. And of course, in every practice, in every profession, you need a kind of system for education and administration. Keeping up that system of education and administration has become, over the last 5 to 10 years, more and more of a burden in the organization. And although the people active with the Trager practice and active in the international organization really see that change of that system of education and administration is necessary, it is pretty difficult for them. It was pretty difficult for them to find a way to develop a new kind of system. And so they came to us and asked for our help in facilitating to design and innovate their own future. And well, what we have done over the last year and a half is work very closely with them in several cycles. And I'll show you a short picture. I'm not sure if you can see it quite as good as I can. We've been through 2 cycles of development with them. We have been starting really to go in terms of the U process, to go into a period of co-sensing. We really wanted to be sure that we had a good view of what was going on in the organization. So actually, I even went to have some Trager sessions. So people really treated me, my body, with their approach. And we've been interviewing, doing quite a few 20 to 25 deep dialogue interviews to understand their system and to understand its ways of working. That part of that we did August, a year and a half ago, in 2013. And we really try to interview people from all the different parts of the Trager system. The outcome of that was a bit amazing to us. We were really surprised by, on the one hand, the deep understanding and the deep commitment and compassionate attitude of practitioners on the ground for the practice and for the people they were treating. And on the other hand, the enormous amount of feelings of discomfort and sometimes anger or disconnects between the same people at the organizational level. And so we tried to design a first conference, which was held in the German city of Bettemburg in September 2013, where we could bring all those experiences, I'm sorry, where we could bring together into one room all those different types of experiences within the Trager group. So we asked them to send people from various parts of the organization, from practitioners, from national associations, from the international bodies, from the instructors, so the people that educate new practitioners, from tutors, the people that guide practitioners in their practice, all those various aspects of their system. And we did in that first conference, a 3-day conference, we walked with them, you could say, almost a complete U process. So we again started by sharing stories, why people had entered the Trager movement, why they were still in there. You can see here, so we did the interviews and the deep sensing, and then went to this conference in Bettemburg. And what really was working very well there in terms of the practice is that we didn't tell them what they should do, or we didn't give expert advice on how we as consultants, and we both, Julie and I, have a lot of consulting experience also as an expert consultant, but we really try to step into their shoes and to help them design their own future. We used storytelling at the first day, and we introduced them to the process of theory U, by the little movie that we all have seen about the three tenors, by a dialogue walk, and by looking at a very fascinating and impactful movie about which is called As It Is in Heaven, which is a movie about a conductor of an orchestra conductor, who gets a heart attack and then returns to the village he was born. People already don't know he came from there, but then to recover, he starts building up a local choir. And in that process, all the relationships within the village come to the surface and are being changed in a process that is sometimes really painful for people. So also the areas of that are not spoken about are surfacing. So the taboos, the bad relationships between people are spoken about, but also the incredible possibility of people to see new things and to explore new possibilities in their own lives, and to develop new capabilities or capacities or competencies that they even didn't think they would have. And so this movie was also about the struggle between this conductor and the local preacher, the local minister. And that is something that is what was a kind of symbol for the deeper level of emotions within the Trager organization, because people could relate that to their own history of the founder, this Dr. Trager, who has an incredible man and had a lot of energy and probably had a kind of guru-like status. And you often see in those type of organizations that people, even if the founder has already died, people still relate to those stories and the whole history of an organization, and have sometimes difficulty to find their own way. So on the wonderful thing was that on the second day, and on that evening that we showed the movie, that was already beginning to start, we felt that feelings about the difficulties in the organization were bubbling up. They were not yet surfacing, but we felt that the mood in the conference was really becoming difficult. And so the next morning we did a check-in, just to ask people where they were and what they were feeling at that point in time. And we used a talking stick for that, and just sat down, and everybody who wanted to speak had the opportunity to speak out whatever he or she wanted to say, without anybody else commenting on it. So there was a kind of sense of really deep listening to each other. And that was the first time in a long period they really could do that. So people could voice their enthusiasm, but also their anger and frustrations, or their feeling of despair about the future of the organization, while it was such a wonderful practice. So people really could open up to each other and to themselves. And there was a first, we had planned this this check-in for, say, 3 quarters. We were with 25 people. And it has been lasting almost the whole morning, just because there was so much of value that needed to be said. Of course, our program was scattered, but that was a good thing, because we were really facilitating the needs of the whole body that was there, and what people needed to say. And I think it was the first time that really started that something really started to shift in that room and in that group. And I think what we have seen developing from then are a few things. First of all, I think people started to relate in a different way to each other. So they started from what we would call, in terms of theory, from an empathic conversation. So people started to see things from the shoes of somebody else, and not only from their own shoes. So the level of listening became quite a lot deeper. That was, I think, one thing. Also, people started to see that change in the organization is not only change in the organization is not only about changing the structures or the administrative bodies and regulations, but the shift is taking place at a much deeper level. And I'm seeing that Stefan has a question: what triggered the shift? I think, in my experience, there are two elements that really triggered the shift. One is the seeing of the movie really moved people. People became really emotional about what happened there. So they were sensitized on a deeper level of understanding and connecting. And secondly, what triggered the shift, I think, was this listening on the second morning during the check-in to all each other's very vulnerable stories. So people could relate to each other in a different way, and people could step out of their fixed mindset and ideas, and look from a perspective that connected the heart between people. So there grew a kind of sense of openness that gave space to an incredible crystallizing of new ideas for the future. So after the lunch on the second day, we really had a very broad brainstorm about new possibilities for the future of the Trager organization. And those were on education, those were on communication. There's so many things, and I could show you pages and pages what people came up with, so much that we hardly had we didn't have the time actually to take them all into account at that point in time. So we made a selection there. Just one other question from Stefan. What question did we ask to start the talking stick around? Is as I remember, it was what's on your heart and mind at this point in time. So it was a very open and simple question. And we have been putting that question into the context of relating to the future of the organization. So people really could connect to their worries, their hopes on the future of the Trager organization. In the afternoon, we crystallized many ideas, and for the first time, people really started prototyping. Prototyping is what we will do in the MOOC this week and the coming week in practice. So people started to work on marketing and communication renewal. So they have been working on setting up a new international website and a new international communication process. People have also been working on prototyping a new type of offering the Trager practice to people, to the public, which is they call Trager for daily life classes. So it's a kind of movement, body treatment exercises that you could compare to yoga classes or comparable approaches. And they have been very successful. They have been prototyping it over the last year, and it's already spreading out through the whole community of the whole worldwide community of Trager. So I think there the first part was laying the groundwork for forward movement. And what we came across there is that it was we've been asking people to refrain from judging too quickly what was going on. So we've been constantly asking people to, just a second, constantly asking people to suspend their judgment on the process, on what they heard from other people, and to listen really open. For these prototypes, people also have been meeting after the conference in Edinburgh by Skype over 4 or 5 months until we would come together at the second conference in Alicante in Spain, and that conference is the starting point of our second movement in the whole process. And there we saw quite a few interesting other things happening. On the one hand, and for some people that was really a disappointment, because people had very high hopes that one intervention would really work, but that was not yet the case, or that one conference would work. What really was the case there is that the difficulties in the organization, so really heavy discussions and debates between different governing bodies in the organization still went on, although people from those bodies were represented at the conference there too. That was for some people that was a kind of a disappointment. Another thing they really had to learn is that there is no one solution to such an organizational development process, and that especially when you try to connect to the deeper levels of people's emotions and future aspirations, it's also about finding many prototypes and many possibilities and trying them out quite quickly to see what works and what doesn't work. So people have, for quite a long time, they were used to debating things and then deciding things in one way, and there were no differences possible. And it was pretty difficult for people to learn to see that innovation through prototyping and to connecting to your highest possible future is something different than taking only a decision and say, okay, this is the way we are going to do it. It's more about creating platforms and possibilities where people can work on new elements of the organization than taking a one for all and forever decision. One thing we did in preparation for the second conference that was held about almost a year ago was that we had very deep leadership dialogue interviews. So with the top 10 to 15 people, we've been holding deep dialogue interviews about their own role in the organization, their history, how they were part of the problem and of the how did they see the solutions. And those were interviews that really synthesized them for the work that had to be done at the conference. We also invited the whole community of the Trager world internationally, and they are 1,500 practitioners, to email us with their questions, their ideas, etc. So we've been working through to several hundreds of emails to connect to them. One thing we did in at the conference is, well, connect back to the prototype. So every prototyping group presented their prototypes, their possibilities, their ideas, their future, and we did something that really helped to see them where they were in history. And I don't know if you can see it, but here is a very small part. There's a kind of history map, and you've all seen the iceberg model, but you can also see the different levels of layers in the iceberg model in this history map. So we asked them to lay out for us the whole history, their values, the surface line of all the events in the organization, the big discussions, the changes in policy, the fights in the organization between different parts, the real big shifts in the way they worked. And what the great advantage of that is that people see both the superficial things as events that have happened or happened, but they are able to reconnect to the real deeper values of the organization. And people for the first time understood how they had been developing from an organization that was built by one man and his companion into a worldwide practice of body workers, and how that had happened, and how they had to deal at some crucial moments, becoming from a fully America-dominated organization to an organization that has two big pillars in both Europe and the US, but also in many other countries all over the world. So a shift in the organizational build-up. Also a shift from being energized and led by one man to an organization that is far more democratic, and where a different model of governance is being put into. So they were able to understand their own history and see, okay, those are the things that we like, those are the things that could be improved, but still felt where they were connected to. And yet, when we were there, it still was a kind of, sometimes it felt like we're somewhere and we don't know how to move forward. We're stuck. We were really felt stuck in the sense that it's so difficult to find ways out of all these organizational and administrative struggles. So, and I must give the credits to my colleague Julie for this. On one evening when I was sitting together with the leaders of two organizational bodies in the organization to do some mediation on a conflict they had, she with the other group, with the rest of the group of 20 people, did something incredibly wonderful with which you would call a social presencing theater, and which has been introduced to you also during the MOOC sessions. Social presencing theater is a way to feel and to connect with your and to move to your highest possible future. And so what we did what she did with that group that evening, and that's another point of shift in the whole group, is she asked them to feel their bodies, to go back into their bodies and feel what they call in the Trager world the hook up, so the awareness of a real healthy body, and then start moving towards a future this healthy body would represent the Trager organization. So how would it feel if the Trager organization would be this healthy body that you normally reach for in a session with your client? And that was something people really could relate to. And they started crying and thinking and moving and really to, this is what can happen. This is what we are, and this is what we can feel. So they really could feel in their bodies what a healthy Trager organization would mean. And that really, for the second time, the first time was this check-in circle, and in this in this conference, it was this social presencing theater on how would it feel if the Trager organization was like a healthy body, that people really started to envision and see the possibilities for such a different way of organizing. And from that, the next day, many different ideas on their organization came up. So they were still working on this Trager for daily life classes. People were had different ideas on the educational practices in the organization, far less hierarchical, far more horizontal. People were thinking about how to attract more people and to the practice. They were really opening up. And what I have seen developing there is, I think, not only the questions or issues, not only the questions or issues on the organizational level, but what happened also is that we saw growing or emerging a new leadership in the organization. People that had been sitting quietly on the side really stepped up and took tasks or became the leader of Prototypes group. Young people that stepped forward and took up things. And so there was a shift from the formal leadership that the organization had before to a far more dispersed and combined leadership of the whole group that has now been working with the group and many others in the organization for almost a year. And So it was really not only building new practices of and new ideas and innovation or prototypes, but it was at the same time the whole process, and that's crucial for Theory U, I think. It was also building a new type of leadership in the organization, a leadership that is not just formal, but it's also a leadership that asks itself the question, and people will start asking themselves the question, what is the situation? What needs to be attended to? What needs to be listened to? And how can I contribute to that? And what we have seen from that emerging is a different way in which people interact with each other. So when we started a year and a half ago, you could see they were in a kind of culture in the organization where a lot of blaming was done. This is not good, but it was always out there and people are not doing this right. So it was a kind of culture of either right or wrong, or blaming the outside world for things not to go in the right direction. People started to connect in a different way. They were far more listening to each other on different levels. They were reconnecting also their organizational practices to the core values of the Trager work itself. So that's more or less where we are at this point in time, and we're now preparing a third conference by the end of this month in Alicante again with them, and there are some key challenges there, because we want and it's also their wish. We want them to take over again and to become fully owner of their own development process. So what we envision to do is to see how they could organize their own new processes in the future. Is there a group of people that can be educated to do those processes without the help of consultants or without the help of facilitators? That's something. And also to see how they can translate more quickly, because now it has taken sometimes a few months or half a year or a year to translate prototypes into practice. And then there is the third challenge, is how to connect this process of renewal with help of the U process methodologies to the current and existing formal organizational structures. So there are the challenges that we still face. But one of the wonderful things is that in the next conferences we will have 15 new people entering the process, that of which quite a few of them already are also following this MOOC course. So that will be interesting, and I've great hopes for how they are moving forward. So, well, we have about a quarter of an hour left, and I would rather stop my my long talk here and see what questions I can answer for you. And if there are any, please feel free to act them. And I see one that is asked by Stefan on how much time we did spend addressing issues like the levels of consciousness and listening and dealing with emotions. I think we, at the first conference, we took half a day to introduce the basics of the U process. And then sometimes during every conference, when necessary, we did step back and tell them a little bit about an exercise or did some extra exercises with them. But most of the time, we just asked them to follow our invitation to to follow our work. Let me see. Martin asked me, how did you pick the movie you chose in the beginning? Was it an element of building trust? We deliberately choose this movie from our experience with this movie and other groups, because there was in this movie, as it is in heaven, there is a sense of one strong local preacher that's a kind of guru-like figure, and also this director was becoming in a far more open way connected or struggling with him. So from the dialogue interviews we did before we started the first conference, we had a sense of what was going on in this organization on a deeper level. And then we thought it was the movie could be helpful to bring that out, to sensitize people to those elements, and it actually worked out well there. Bob is asking me, what do the leaders of the organization say about this work, and what impact on organization results do you see so far? I talked already a little bit about it. So within the international governing body that is called the Council of Trustees, people are really supportive for this work because they see two important elements. Because Theory U connects to the heart of their own work and their own practice. So the values we share about body and mind, about not only being cognitive but also intuitive, are shared. And the impact on organization is first and for all, as I said, new leadership that is emerging, new people taking up leadership tasks everywhere, and secondly, a real change in the way people interact with each other. So the communication within the organization is becoming much more open. And then thirdly, in a practical sense, in terms of they have been sending out this new work on the Trager for daily life classes that have been implemented in the organization. They are working on their website pretty intensively to improve that. So from the beginning, the start of it has been pretty impressive, given that the number of practitioners, 1,500, is on a worldwide scale pretty small, and most of the organizational and governing work is all voluntary, so no paid money there. So that's one thing we also had to learn and to deal with, that the pace of work and development in the organization is not something as quick in a large organization or in a large business organization. Marcos is asking for a general picture of what is being dialogued. I'm not sure, Martin, or Marcos, if I understand you exactly. So please try to reformulate it a bit in Jin again. I could send you, if you ask to, a longer PowerPoint to share some more insights. Paolo is asking, how did you manage to convince them to go through the U process? Well, we were lucky here. They approached us, and we didn't have to approach them. So they approached the Presencing Institute because they felt that the way we work with Theory U was more or less helpful for them. And ever since they have been working in this way. Although Also within the Trager organization, of course, there were quite a few people that said, well, this approach is never going to work. And there was some kind of struggle on the governing level between people that wanted to act in a more rational or way instead of the methodology of theory U, of course. Well, any other questions? I've here one that Monique already asked quite a while ago about the movie As It Is in Heaven. There are, of course, as she says, a lot of symbolisms, archetypes, and unconscious patterns in the movie. We did not explicitly go into explaining the movie. We only asked people what their experience were with or during looking at the movie, because we didn't want to go into a cognitive discussion about what is going on in your group, but only sensitize them for what was going on, because the work that had to be done in this renewal group is the work between the people who are there. So we didn't want to have them to talk about something outside, but do the work with themselves together in the group. Catherine is asking an interesting question. Could you repeat how you selected the volunteering participants? Could everybody participate, and did they sign a formal intention to be part of the experience? People were selected by the governing body of the Trager group. They came from various parts of the organization. So there were practitioners, there were tutors, there were students, there were instructors, there were administrative people from various countries. All of the national associations were represented. So kind of the whole system was in the room. And we asked people to have a commitment for a 2-year process. And that was not a formal signing and commitment, but we also but we asked people, are you really want to be? Do you really want to help the whole organization with this process? And that is. That is, of course, what happened. There were also some people that, after the first conference a year and a half ago, stepped out of the process because they had difficulty connecting to it, or for some time reasons, etc. And then some new people entered. And now we are in the third conference, and looking also into the future. We, together with the committee of trustees and the executive board, came to the conclusion that this was a good moment to again invite quite a few new people, as to be able to spread the way we work to a larger group. Bob is asking how many people have attended conferences, and what is the ideal number. I don't know what the ideal number is. In this group, we have been working with about 20 people, and in the next conferences, we will be working with 30. It all depends on the possibilities of the system, and we've also been working with groups of 60, and even I have another colleague who has been working with a conference of several thousand people. So, but it depends on the organization or the system you are working with. Sometimes small groups are important, and sometimes other ones. But it's related to the issue. Is the work Paulo is asking that the Presencing and Institute and we are doing voluntary. To be honest, no, it's not. Sometimes we do voluntary work, but for this assignment and for quite a few others, we get paid as consultants. Ruth is asking if the core values identified after the process are supported by all, and do these values still help the organization to change? And the interesting thing here is that the core values, so the deepest level of the iceberg, you could say, haven't been changing that much. So they are about deep connection, they are about health, they are about trustworthiness. And those are values that still are very much alive in the organization and in the practice of the Trager practitioners. The important thing is that they had probably been losing a bit of sight on those deeper values. And that is what we restructured, reconnected to with the history map. That we could see that on the surface, many things had been changed, and on the policy level also many things had been changed, but that on the deeper levels of the organization, the values and the mission and the intention of the organization were still deeply rooted in the same practice that Milton Trager, the founder, had created with them. So, and what is so interesting is that you see a kind of reconnecting here to the source, but in different circumstances, because from the 1960s to 2015, of course, the way people interact, the way people live in society, the way people have a consciousness about body and mind practices is changed incredibly. And people see that now from a different perspective and are starting to reconnect to that in a different way. So, well, we have another minute or so left, so maybe one last question if there is one, and otherwise I would say thank you to all of you for listening and viewing to this thought. And if you have any other question or want to share, put it on the Presencing site or try to contact me via email. So thank you very much, and good afternoon.